You're kneeling in a stone chamber beneath Westminster Abbey, and the smell hits you first. Not incense, not candles. Rotting flesh mixed with rosewater and something sharper, something chemical that burns the inside of your nose. The year is 1327, and you're watching servants prepare King Edward II for his funeral. Except there's a problem. The body has been dead for 3 weeks in September heat, and what's left isn't a king anymore. It's a swollen, blackened thing that's splitting at the seams, leaking fluids that servants are frantically mopping up with linen cloths they will later burn because no amount of washing will remove what sea soaked into the fabric. But here's where it gets worse. Royal protocol demands the body must lie in state for viewing, which means someone has to make this corpse presentable. So they're painting it. Actually painting the king's face with a mixture of white lead and mercury to hide the discoloration. Stuffing his cheeks with cloth soaked in myrrh to give the illusion of flesh. And here's the part that'll make your stomach turn. They re-sewing his lips shut because the jaw keeps falling open and revealing a tongue that says turned black and started to protrude. The seamstress doing this work is crying not from grief, but because she's been threatened with execution if she refuses, and her hands are shaking so badly. She keeps piercing the decomposing lip tissue, which releases small bursts of gas that smell like hell itself decided to take physical form. This wasn't unusual. This was Tuesday for medieval royalty. Because here's what nobody tells you about kings and queens throughout history. The moment they died, their bodies became political weapons, and the people tasked with handling them were forced into intimate, nightmare-inducing contact with decay that would traumatize a modern coroner. When Henry I died in 1135 in Normandy, his body had to be transported back to England, which meant weeks of travel. The solution? A surgeon was paid to cut open the corpse, remove all the internal organs which were already liquefying, and fill the body cavity with salt. Except the process of opening a decomposing abdomen released such noxious fumes that the surgeon reportedly died within days from the infection he contracted through the cuts on his own hands. They still packed the king in salt, sewed him shut, wrapped him in lead, and shipped him across the channel, where he continued rotting despite their best efforts, arriving at Reading Abbey smelling so profoundly putrid that the monks who received him vomited during the funeral prayers. But at least those kings died of natural causes or battle wounds. Edward II's death was something else entirely. The official story claimed he died of natural causes while imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, but whispers spread immediately because everyone who saw the body noticed something horrifying. There were no visible marks of violence, no signs of poisoning, nothing that would indicate how a relatively healthy 43-year-old man suddenly died. This is where history gets dark, even by medieval standards, because the rumor that circulated, and has persisted for 7 centuries, is that Edward was murdered using a method specifically designed to leave no external evidence. According to contemporary accounts that were quickly suppressed, assassins entered his cell at night, held him down, and inserted a red-hot iron poker through a horn tube inserted into his rectum, burning his internal organs while leaving his skin unmarked. The screams were supposedly heard throughout the castle, so loud that guards were told he was suffering from terrible stomach pains. Whether this actually happened, or was simply the most grotesque rumor people could imagine to explain a suspicious death, we'll never know for certain. But what we do know is that something about his death was bad enough that his body was held for weeks before being displayed. And even then, the viewing was carefully controlled and brief. This is the reality of royal death that paintings and history books hide. The corpses of kings weren't preserved with dignity in clean marble tombs. They were butchered, stuffed, painted, and paraded while servants and embalmers worked in conditions that would violate every modern health code ever written. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, her body exploded, literally burst open from internal gas buildup during the night before her funeral because the embalmers had done a poor job removing the organs. Attendants woke to the sound of her wooden coffin cracking in fluid seeping onto the floor, and they spent hours cleaning up what had been England's most powerful monarch while trying not to vomit. The lead lining they'd installed was supposed to prevent exactly this. But decomposition doesn't care about your plans or your medals, or your desperate need to maintain the illusion that royalty is somehow exempt from the disgusting realities of death. And if you think that's disturbing, let me tell you about the royal bloodletting beds, because this is where medieval medicine and royal privilege created a nightmare that lasted for centuries. Every major European palace had a dedicated chamber for therapeutic bleeding, and these rooms were where kings and queens went to have their blood drained based on the insane medical belief that most illnesses were caused by having too much blood or bad blood that needed releasing. The beds in these chambers were specially designed with grooves carved into the wooden frames that led to collection buckets, and these grooves were never properly cleaned. We're talking about centuries of dried blood, bits of scabbed tissue, and God knows what else building up in the crevices of furniture that multiple monarchs bled into. King Charles II of England was bled repeatedly during his final illness in 1685, and physicians drained so much blood from him that he went into shock, at which point they decided the solution was to bleed him more. He died after having roughly half his blood volume removed over several days, growing progressively weaker, while court physicians congratulated themselves on their aggressive treatment. But the blood itself wasn't even the worst part. It's what they did with it afterward. Royal blood couldn't simply be thrown away because of its symbolic significance, so it was collected, sometimes mixed with wine or herbs, and distributed to nobles as a bizarre form of cure-all medicine. People actually drank the blood of kings, believing it contained healing properties or divine essence. When Louis XIV underwent one of his frequent bloodlettings, courtiers would literally compete for access to the still warm blood, mixing it into tonics. They deconsume while standing around the king's bed, watching him slowly turn pale and clammy. The physicians running these sessions wore leather aprons permanently stained rust brown, and they'd move from patient to patient without washing their lancets, spreading infection with every slice they made into royal veins. The French court took this obsession to truly deranged levels. They believed that royal children needed to be bled regularly starting from infancy to prevent future illness, which meant babies as young as 6 months old were strapped down and cut open by physicians who had no concept of hygiene or appropriate blood loss for an infant. Many of these children died, but the deaths were attributed to weak constitutions rather than the medical torture they'd endured. Marie Antoinette was bled during her pregnancy on the advice of court physicians who were convinced that pregnant women had dangerous excess blood that threatened both mother and child. She was cut multiple times throughout her 3rd trimester, while physicians monitored the color and consistency of the blood they drained, looking for signs they had no idea how to interpret. The fact that she survived childbirth is remarkable, given that she probably went into labor severely anemic from months of unnecessary blood removal. And here's the detail that'll stay with you. Those collection buckets under the bloodletting beds, they were rarely emptied daily. Blood would sit for days, congealing, rotting, attracting flies, while the next patient was brought in and positioned over the same bucket. The smell in these chambers was described by one visiting ambassador as reminiscent of a battlefield 3 days after combat. That specific combination of old blood and infection that you can taste in the back of your throat. Servants assigned to clean these rooms frequently quit or had to be threatened with punishment because the work was so revolting. They scrape out buckets filled with what can only be described as blood pudding mixed with dead insects and mysterious chunks, all while the next royal patient was being prepared in the adjoining dressing chamber. The practice only declined when enough royals finally died from the bleeding itself that even medieval physicians started connecting the dots between draining someone as blood and them becoming fatally weak. But it took centuries. Centuries of kings and queens lying in grooved beds designed like human drainage systems, watching their blood flow into filthy buckets, while physicians assured them This was the pinnacle of medical science. The beds themselves, considered precious royal furniture, were passed down through generations, which meant later monarchs were bleeding into the same carved channels their ancestors had used, adding their fluids to deposits that were never fully cleaned, just wiped down and reused. Some of these beds still exist in museum collections, and if you look closely at the wood grain, you can still see the dark stains that no amount of time or treatment has completely removed. That's not finish. That's kings. That's queens. That as centuries of royal blood soaked so deep into the wood that it became part of the furniture itself, a permanent reminder that power and privilege could not protect anyone from the horrifying medical practices of their age, or the reality that underneath. The crowns and ceremonies, they were just bodies that bled and rotted exactly like everyone else.